Welcome to the Animal Free Labcast, everybody. I'm back today with Dr. Gemma Davies. Hiya, Gemma. How are you?
Hi, Carla. I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. So, for the eagle-eyed amongst you, you will see we're trying something new this week. We're doing video. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We'll see how this goes.
We'll see how it goes.
Just a little bit. So, Gemma, what have we got coming up today?
So today we're going to be answering everybody's burning questions all about animal-free research. So thank you so much to everyone who got in touch to send in your questions, and we're going to try and get through as many as we can.
We had some really good questions, didn't we? So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, really appreciate sending them in. So why don't we start with a political question for you, Carla? So this is from Claire on Instagram, and she says, do you know the politicians in Reform's policies on animal testing? I can't find anything. And then a similar one from Cruelty Free Forever, also on Instagram, who says, have you presented your work to this government?
Thank you, Claire, and Cruelty Free Forever. Excellent questions. I'll start with the second one about presenting our work to government. So, yes, because the quick answer to this, we have a small public affairs team who are in and out of Parliament and talking to government all the time. So as you know, at the time of recording this, they are at the Conservative Party conference, they've been at the Labour Party conference, they've been at Lib Dems. We help to coordinate the APPG, so the All-Party Parliamentary Group on phasing out animal testing, which is a gathering of MPs from across different parties who all care about this issue. We go regularly to the Home Office stakeholder meetings. So the Home Office regulates the use of animals in the UK or in Great Britain. So we go to all of those meetings. And we've met with the Science Minister a few times, Patrick Vallance, as well. So there's absolutely loads happening. We have our flagship campaign, Herbie's Law, which is calling for a phase out of animal testing by 2035. So that's the kind of big vehicle. Loads and loads happening across the political spectrum. But in terms of Claire's question on reform, I mean, Claire, same here. We think that, their position is unclear at the moment. They're focused on other issues, aren't they? But we'd love them to develop a really good, progressive, positive policy on this issue. So, if you live in one of the constituencies that has a Reform MP, then please do write to them and let them know that this is an issue that matters to you. That really is the best way of getting it onto their agenda. We see it time and time again with the MPs from different parties across the board. So if you live in Ashfield or Clacton, East Wiltshire, Runcorn, Helsby, Boston and Skegness, please do write to your MP. We've got an online tool that you can do that on our website, animalfreeresearchuk.org. So we take all the work out of it for you. You literally put in your postcode, you can hit send, and that will send a message to your MP.
Yeah, and it really does make so much difference. Our public affairs team have said, MPs have come up to them at the conferences and said it's because they've had emails from our supporters. It really does work. So that's the best way to bring this to their attention, definitely.
Absolutely. So Claire, Cruelty Free Forever, I hope that answers your questions. Right, one for you now, Gemma. Helena on Instagram says, what is the main pushback you get when trying to ask medical companies and universities, etc., to stop using animals for testing and animal ingredients in medicines, etc.?
Yeah, so I would say there's quite a few different reasons that we do come across as pushback for why researchers say they need to use animals in their research. But I'd probably say the most common one that we come across is people saying that there aren't any non-animal methods that are complex enough to replace an animal. And this is something that I have been thinking about a little bit recently as I've been writing a little blog that's going to be in our next edition of Replacement News, so you can read that soon. But it does feel like there is some really slow progress that's been happening in medical research, over the past decades really, which when you think about it is quite surprising really, considering we're talking about something as important as our health. You think this would be a real priority. Obviously, we have made some really amazing advances over the years. We've mapped the human genome, and off the back of that, we've discovered gene editing and things like immunotherapies, and there's lots of amazing achievements. But the truth is we're using a lot of the same old-fashioned traditional methods that we've been using all of this time.
50 years or more, really, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And nothing else has stayed the same for that long. And these methods probably aren't even the best scientifically. But there is still a lot of reluctance, in researchers to embrace and learn to use the really innovative and new technologies that are coming out. But these new technologies are really changing how we're studying the human body and what we can apply then to drug development. And these models really are getting more complex all the time. So these are things like the organ-on-chip technologies, which we can combine with things like complex cell culture methods, so growing things like organoids, so that's growing cells in 3D. And using things like induced pluripotent stem cells, your favourite,
My
Carla.
favourite. They're like magic.
They are, they're magic cells. And these, really closely mimic what is happening in our bodies. And then we can combine that with things like computer modelling, AI, sequencing of patient samples. And, there's all these different things that we can do that we can combine to really help us to understand what's happening in our bodies. And it's much more effective than trying to do that similar research in an animal. And it can take us further than we've ever gone before and lead us to these new breakthroughs that we really need. And it's actually really exciting because, these new technologies, there's work being published using them all the time, and it should be really inspiring for researchers to see what others are able to achieve and then look to include those kind of technologies in their work as well. But these pushbacks do keep coming because a lot of people are reluctant to move away from their established methods and the way that they've done their work throughout their career. Other people might not be aware that these technologies exist and the things that they can do. And other people might need some training or some money to be able to buy some new equipment. There's a lot of pushbacks in all these different areas, but we need this big culture change and to really push through and make things happen. So this is what Herbie's Law is all about. It's going to get us out of that rut. It can help to provide training and financial support for researchers to really be able to embrace these new technologies and continue to develop them so that they become more complex and they will become the new default in future.
And there's so much excitement among the researchers who are using these, aren't they? I mean, I was at a thing last week at Queen Mary University of London. It was a kind of gathering of organ-on-a-chip experts. And, it's international. You can see that the results that they get in and the breakthroughs and the enthusiasm and the excitement. And it's just a lovely group of people who are just making a difference. And you can see we're almost at that tipping point now where it's going to catch on. But we just need a bit more of...
The more people talk about this and publish their work, the more people are going to get interested in this and it will develop. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so I've got a question here for you, Carla, from Emmy on Instagram. And she says, my question to you, what about the EMA of the EU? So the EMA requires that all drugs that come from non-animal research be tested on animals first, even though 95% of animal testing drugs fail in humans.
Okay. Great question, Emmy. So for people who don't know, the EMA is the European Medicines Agency. And we hear, Emmy's talked about 95% drug failure rate. It's anything between 92 and 99%, depending on the disease that you're trying to treat. So, for some diseases, it's as much as 99%. So, but there or thereabouts, pretty bad. So let me explain the process then. So before any new drug advances to a clinical trial, so it goes out and is used on patients, sort of in an initial phase, regulatory agencies like the EMA, so the European Medicines Agency, or the FDA, which is the US version, the Food and Drug Administration, or in the UK here we have the MHRA. So they all require a rigorous body of evidence to demonstrate the safety of the drug that's being tested. Now that's really important. Nobody wants that not to happen. We need to know that our drugs are safe, and we've had some really devastating examples of when they haven't been safe, like with thalidomide, and we've talked about that before. So everybody wants this. We need safer medicines. Yeah. So, but also, obviously we work, the world, whatever you think about this, we do operate in a globalized economy, and, big pharmaceutical businesses, they do have to be able to operate internationally. And so we need to streamline and standardise that collection of data across different countries. So there's a body called, now wait for it, the International Council for Harmonisation of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals for Human Use. I have read that out because
That's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. Let's call it the ICH for short. So the ICH is an international body that standardises and streamlines the collection of all this data and tries to make it a little bit easier so that we don't have every country needing something slightly different, because then we'd never get anywhere.
Yeah.
And they've got a set of regulatory guidelines which are adopted by lots of countries, including the UK, including Europe, and including the United States. So the important thing to know about these guidelines from the ICH is that they are guidance. They're not a concrete obligation. Now, this is not widely known and or widely understood. So we have taken some legal advice on this. Because it is complex. So we've got this quite complex regulatory framework, but basically animal tests can only be used where an alternative method does not exist. So drug developers are actually required to use non-animal methods wherever possible, with animal tests only required where alternatives aren't available. So again, we're not seeing this happening in practice particularly or at all, but that is what the regulations really say.
Yeah.
And back in September 2023, the UK government actually stated there is no United Kingdom legislation that mandates animal testing. So absolutely not requiring animal testing in the UK. So that's really important to remember. They said that data from a suitably validated model that's been shown to be predictive could be submitted instead of animal data. So if there's an alternative and that alternative is properly working, then you could use your test data from that alternative instead of using animals.
Yeah.
And they also said that on a case-by-case basis, you could make an appropriate justification for actually not doing animal tests at all, and that could be accepted. For example, if you could kind of show that there was no relevant species to test your animals, to test on, compared with a human. So that's the government's official position. That is what they told us. It's written down. They said that back in 2023.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily what's happening in practice, though.
No.
So obviously, having these internationally consistent regulations is important, as I said before, so companies can do business in a globalised economy. And in fact, what we're seeing is that these international regulatory requirements, they're not the excuse for not doing, for not replacing animals with alternatives. They're not stopping other countries from taking bolder steps towards replacing animals with human-specific technologies. The UK is getting left behind, and if we continue to continue to delay and not change, then, we can see real progress happening in the USA and in the European Union, who are investing and introducing regulatory changes to promote the uptake of human-specific technologies. So our country needs to get on board with this. Yeah. Otherwise, there's going to be huge ramifications for the businesses and for patients in our country. So.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. No, you explained that really clearly because it is so complicated.
It is really complicated, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about it as well. Yeah. So
exactly, like you say, those guidelines, they are printed on every single page. It says this is guidance; it's not legally binding. But the way that they are kind of quoted as a reason that you need to use an animal is kind of that. It doesn't quite connect, does it? No,
and I think, companies are caught in a bit of a catch-22 with the regulators. The companies think the regulators want it. The regulators go, well, we keep being given it, so this must be the thing that we need to see. Yeah. And they're kind of, it's sort of in a kind of lockstep, they're caught up. Yeah. So, but the government, UK government has clarified, no, it doesn't need to be done like this.
Yeah, exactly. So this is why we're looking forward to the roadmap to see what changes they're going to bring in, because something's got to change.
Yeah.
You're stuck in a never-ending cycle.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Next question from Janice on email. How can duplicated experiments all over the world on animals be halted?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's a really important one as well, because this has been a problem for a long time. And the main reason for this is that scientists generally aren't publishing all of their results. So, people tend to really only publish their very best results that show really strong findings. But there really is a need to publish negative results as well, because we need to know what doesn't work as much as we need to know what does.
Absolutely.
And if people were to start openly sharing things that didn't work in experiments, whether, it's a certain method, you can't use it to grow a certain type of cell, or a certain reagent that doesn't work in a particular type of experiment, that could make a massive difference and save so much time and money and energy on repeating things that other people have already tried. And when we're talking about animal-based research, that really translates into saving potentially a huge number of animal lives, because obviously, as is the nature of research, there's going to be a lot of things that didn't work as expected. They didn't end up showing anything, and maybe that work ended up taking a different direction completely. That happens all the time. But the reality is those results that didn't show what it was supposed to show won't have been published or shared with scientists that are working in a similar area. So there's a very good chance that people will repeat the same thing and fail again, unfortunately. And I mean, you can understand how it happens, because of course nobody likes to kind of promote that something hasn't worked or didn't go the way that they were expecting, of course. But that has knock-on effects. So, they might need some solid results to be able to show their funders that, this work is progressing, and also to have some things to talk about when you're applying for future funding as well. So it's really important. But this is a wider issue, because generally people don't like to share results and their methods until they're officially published, because of course you don't want someone to come in and publish something before you and steal your thunder, because that can have a knock-on effect as well. Yeah, that is the thing. I've heard people say that they might have presented work at a conference, and obviously there's going to be similar research groups there all working on similar things, and then people have pinched bits of their data or copied their experiments and published them first. It does happen.
My goodness.
So you can see why people would be reluctant to do it as well. But I think looking to the future, sharing data, the good and the bad, is something that really does need to happen when we're talking about these new non-animal technologies, because we need to get these technologies accepted by the regulator. We need to get them to be much more widely used. But to really move forward with those technologies, we need to be able to train other researchers. We have to share where these technologies work and where they don't work. And we need to work together as a community to really understand what we can do with these new technologies. And there is a lot of discussion around this at the moment in the scientific world and the wider community, because mostly of AI and computer models. Because, of course, to be able to make AI as effective as possible, it needs to have all the available information put in to train it, because AI can only ever be as good as what it's being trained on. So if researchers aren't publishing their full results, and companies are being reluctant to share their data because they might be worried about things like intellectual property rights and things like that, then this could be a real stumbling block in progressing this area of technology. And that is quite concerning, but it's not a problem just in science, it is across the board. So we are going to have to wait and see what's going to happen there, because this could be a real problem in moving away, not just from using animals in research, but also advancing these new technologies in general. But by encouraging researchers and companies to openly share their data, whether it's good or bad, that is really going to help to advance our common goal of moving medical research forward.
Gosh, you can see that's going to be a real kind of issue. I was going to say for the future, but actually for now, Yeah, and as you say, not just kind of affecting our area, as important as this is, but affecting so much, because it's just human nature that you don't want to share the things that didn't work. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But every single area is kind of looking at ways to integrate AI and make things faster and more efficient with AI. But you really do have to train it thoroughly and properly, otherwise you can't fully trust it. So that's important. Absolutely. Yeah, got so much potential, but as you said, a lot of ethics and stuff to kind of think around with it as well. Exactly. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for all your questions. We've got a few more that, maybe we'll come back to in another episode. But yeah, that's all we've got time for today. We're going to be back in a fortnight. Well, actually, We're just talking about maybe it'll be a bit more than a fortnight, because we know that the Home Office is going to be publishing its annual statistics on animal experiments. That's coming soon. So it'll be the stats for the 2024. They'll be publishing in a few weeks. So we're thinking that what we'll do is we'll hop on as soon as we've got those and do a special podcast and just, give you the kind of the headlines on that and explain kind of all, everything that's going on with those. We'll see what happens with that. So, back in just over a fortnight with all the latest from the heart of animal free research. But before we go, we've got to do a poll question because we didn't have one last week. So, Gemma, what is this week's poll question?
So it is, to avoid duplicate animal tests, should researchers be incentivised to share their results with others? Yes or no? So you can vote on X, LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram, and we'll discuss the results in the next episode. And if you have any other questions that you'd like to send in, or you'd like to tell us your thoughts about the episode or anything else, then please do drop us an email at hello@animalfreeresearchuk.org.
Okay, and just tell us the poll question one more time.
It is, to avoid duplicate animal tests, should researchers be incentivised to share their results with others? Yes or no?
So that's the good stuff and the bad stuff.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, well, interesting to see if that's going to be another 99%. Well, maybe there's some other ideas out there. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for listening and watching if you did that. Let us know what you think of this new video format as well. Should we carry on doing it? Because we've loved it, haven't we, Gemma?
I'm not watching it back, I'll tell you that.
No. We'll leave that to everybody else. Well, thanks so much for being with us, and we'll talk with you next time.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Gemma.